A bit of a pre-intro for this next speaker. In June, early July of last year, when Nigel announced that he was not going to continue as leader, having won this great victory and he would quit at the top, I went, yes. And that meant I could go too, which was fabulous. And I sort of looked around and went, who could possibly pick this up for a few months while we elect a new leader, which was clearly going to be something we'd do quite quickly, and then on we'd go to further glory. And of course, the person I immediately lit upon was Paul Oakden. And I said to Paul, I just need you to pick this up for 2 or 3 months. It'll be a doddle, it's over the summer, nothing's going to happen. And he went, oh, right, okay. Fell for it. And he has had 6 years of the same pain that I had in 6 years as chairman in the last 14 months. And I have to say, he looks pretty good on it, doesn't he? He has got his revenge, of course, because when it came down to needing an interim leader 3 months ago, he came back and did the same thing to me. He said, look, we've just got to put a name into the Electoral Commission. You won't have to do anything. And to be fair, he has been as good as his word, because actually, I discovered that being the leader is, being compared to being the chairman, a doddle. Because the chairman does all the terrible shoveling, and as the leader, you can sort of swan about, writing things and sending them out, and dispensing words of wisdom and getting other people to do stuff, which is great. So he has been at my right-hand side now for quite a number of years, since he came in as the national agent in the general election in 2015. And Paul Oakden has been actually the person who has ensured that this party has made it through the last 14 months to this point and is here in good fettle today. He is extraordinarily bright, incredibly energetic, really good on the media, and has been an absolute asset to this party. It is also, by the way, tomorrow his birthday. So, tomorrow, I hope you will record that fact in suitable form. But in the meantime, I'd like to hand you over to the party chairman, Paul Oakden.
It was better last night. It was better last night. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here. My last annual conference as chairman. And as some of you may remember, I've said that before. According to some, this is the last annual UKIP conference. But worry not, friends, the same thing was said about last year. And yet, here we are. I've been allocated this section to deliver an annual review, a look back over a remarkable, transformative, and bruising 14 months. 14 months where the axis of chaos did all they could to bring our party down and consign us to the history books. I have to say, they gave it a good go. And yet, here we are. 377 days ago, just 100 miles along the coast, I stood on a platform like this, an interim chairman preparing to stand aside in anticipation of a new team taking the helm. And I was ready to go. I had an inkling of the challenges that were gathering on the horizon for our party. Our star had moved on, and the majority of the team that had worked with him to bring such success were heading for pastures new. The group that remained, just a fifth of the size of what it had been a year earlier, worked through a difficult 2016 summer. But we believed that if we could deliver a going concern with a political future to a new leader, we would have played our part, and despite the problems we faced during those summer months, we got there. Just. As Diane James was welcomed onto the stage, smiling, waving, and seemingly avoiding kisses, And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what you really call vicoactus. There was a sense of hope and optimism. There were cheers, tears, and dancing deers as a packed hall let loose a collective sigh of relief that we could finally move on, pull together, march again. But it wasn't to be. I was tucked up in bed 18 days later when the call came through from a colleague in America to tell me that Diane, who was in Belgium, was about to resign. It came as no surprise. And the fact that I learnt of her decision, made an hour ahead of me from somebody who was 7 hours behind me, summed up perfectly what those 18 days were like. I was particularly vexed because just a few days later, I'd been due to hand over the reins of the chairmanship to a successor at a planned NEC meeting. Now, for those who don't know, the chairmanship is gifted by the leader with the approval of the NEC. When a new leader is appointed, they attend the next NEC meeting, put forward their choice for chairman, and then the NEC hopefully approve it. The departing chairman, appointed by the previous leader, smiles a lot and heads swiftly to the exit to resume a normal life. That had been my plan. You can all be reassured I have no intention, when I finally get there, of doing what Crowther did and inadvertently ending up as a leader later on. I well remember standing at 5:30 the next morning at Leicester train station, on my way to London to do the rounds, interviews with the BBC, Sky and ETV. In a strange twist of fate, vicoactus had ensured that as far as Elcon were concerned, Nigel was still our leader. This worked well for me, if not so for him. To my mind, Nigel had appointed me as his chairman as he left. And I wasn't going to be allowed to escape, so frankly, he shouldn't be allowed to either. But actually, being the man that he is, Nigel understood the importance of maintaining a sense of calm, and so stepped back in as if nothing had ever happened. Order was restored, albeit temporarily. Leadership is about judgment, knowing when to make the right call and knowing what the right call is. By way of an example, good judgment, as demonstrated in fairness by Diane, is accepting that if being the leader isn't for you, it's better to resign quickly before anybody else realizes it. I've never criticized Diane James for resigning after 18 days. Actually, I thought it took a lot of courage to recognize that quickly that the right thing to do was to move on, and I will continue saying so. As a nod to an incident that followed, bad judgment would be inviting former Army Commando Mike Hookham outside for a chat. And so came the next ripple that we had to deal with. I won't linger on it long, but I will say that having conducted the investigation into the Strasbourg spat, alongside our party secretary, nothing I saw or heard during that period suggested for a moment that Mike Hookham laid a finger on anybody. What was clear was that somebody thought it wise, quite sensibly, to leave a room at high speed when confronted by an agitated Yorkshireman. And frankly, none of us could blame him for it. What we needed to do was to pull together, more than ever. And for that, we needed a popular, fresh-faced and dynamic new leader to unify the party. From my position as chairman, this held extra importance. What was becoming obvious was that money was going to be an issue if we didn't get somebody in place quickly. In a piece I wrote recently, I commented that for every £1 we raise in membership subscriptions, we need to raise £2 in donations just to provide a basic platform of operations. It was safe to say that after the 18 days of Diane James and 2 leadership elections in 6 months, the majority of the big donors were starting to hold back. So when Paul Nuttall got elected as leader at the end of November, on a promise of pulling the party together, things really did start to look good. UKIP seemed to be getting its groove back. Now, I should say at this point that Paul's decision to stand for the leadership was done reluctantly. It was born out of duty rather than desire. But we all believed in Paul and the potential that he had to do what was necessary. And he started with huge energy and drive and began to deliver on his promise of unifying the party, travelling around and speaking to every group about the part they could play in the new UKIP. And then came our favourite place, Stoke. Yeah. An election too soon. Huge pressure was put on Paul's shoulders to stand. In a Labour heartland that had voted in favour of Brexit, it seemed on the surface to be a great opportunity to go for their jugular in their own backyard. What it actually proved was the depths that the Labour Party machine and their new breed of Red Guards would go to protect what they believed to be theirs by right. We thought that maybe we'd seen it all when Labour supporters shouted abuse at Rabbi Shnerodzi on his way into a public meeting, telling him to go back home where he came from. But actually it got worse. I can't think of any other circumstances where it would be acceptable to publicly persecute a man for having witnessed a tragedy at the age of 12 years old. Truly, I've never seen anything so disgraceful. For Paul, and he'd openly admit it, his leadership came to an end in the early hours of that Friday morning. I remember sitting with him at 6:30, and everything was telling Paul that he should step away, to go back to a quiet life in the northwest. But he recognized, rolling down the hill, were local elections. After Stoke, nobody believed that they were going to be anything other than extremely difficult. And I think it shows the character of Paul Nuttall, that rather than step aside and leave those difficulties for the next guy, he stayed where he was, kept his shoulders back, his head up, and faced them head on. You have to say that Paul wasn't particularly a lucky leader. Just as we were preparing to face the county elections from a fairly tricky position, Mrs. May piped up and persuaded 7/8 of the people who want Brexit to vote for her in a snap election. Paul stayed on through the local and then general elections to take the blame for them as well. And at that point, finally, we thought it was appropriate to let the poor man go home. What he really deserves from all of us is a huge round of applause for doing his duty bravely and with good grace, the culmination of a long career of loyally supporting this party and this cause. You might just recognize the top of his head there, ladies and gentlemen. He sat just there. When a party has a strong popular cause and momentum behind it, it attracts support. When its poll ratings are falling and people think its job is done, it's really difficult to keep the money flowing in. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the position we have found ourselves in since the end of February. But alongside the difficulties, we have been incredibly lucky. Three main things have got us through. One, a lot of hard work from the team to keep costs down and income flowing. Many of you might know that over this last year, we raised £350,000 more than we spent. Contrast that to the previous year, where we spent £850,000 more than we raised. That, ladies and gentlemen, was not an accident. Two, the dedication of 2 or 3 major donors who have kept the faith. Of particular mention, a real giant in our party, Alan Baum. I remember talking to Alan back in December, and he said to me, Paul, it doesn't matter who the leader of this party is. What matters is that this party survives. May will let us down. Labour will let us down. And if we're not here to pick up the mess, Brexit will never happen. Out came his checkbook, and here we are because of it. And 3, and of course, most importantly, the fantastic and continuing commitment of you, our members, who want to see our party succeed and prosper in spite of our internal conflicts. Now, the question that needs to be asked is, why haven't I said this before now? Many have criticised the centre for sitting quietly and not talking about what's been going on. Well, anybody who's ever run any kind of business will tell you that in hard times, the last thing you can afford to do is run around telling everybody how big a hole you're in. It doesn't sit well with the investors. So sadly, 90% of what we have been doing over the last year has needed to pass quietly, without fuss, and very much without drawing attention to itself. It's also true that whatever else might have been taking place, however many attacks may have been launched on us, no member of the central team has ever taken to publicly attacking a fellow member of our party. And as you all know, there has been provocation. But ultimately, we recognized that an attack on one of us should always be considered to be an attack on all of us, regardless of whether it's launched from outside or inside our ranks. I'm delighted, though, that our most recent mission, which was to get the party through to this conference and ready to be handed over as a going concern to our new leader, has been achieved. We are here, we are healthy, we are alive, and we are going to move forward. I made mention earlier to a small team, those people that have found themselves doing 5 times the work under enormous pressure. They're the people you talk to at head office, the press office, the legal team. What's even more remarkable is that alongside that, at the start of the summer, they collectively sacrificed £16,000 a month from their salaries whilst continuing that work to help our party to survive. And contrary to popular belief, no one in UKIP has ever earned a huge salary in the first place. Can I please ask you, for those members of staff, those members of the team, I know of no other organisation where the salaried staff would voluntarily make that level of sacrifice to help it to survive. Please join me and give them a huge round of applause. I want to mention somebody that you don't hear about very often before I leave, which is our party secretary, Adam. You only ever tend to hear from Adam when someone's in trouble. So if you've never heard of him, that's probably a good thing. One thing that's tickled me over the last few months especially is the fact that I've been referred to in hustings and online as being part of UKIP's establishment. And of course I am. In fact, arguably I'm one of the last remnants of the Farage establishment left in the party. But when Nigel and Steve chose to move on, one person put down his bag and said, I'm going to stay and I'm going to help you work through this. And he's done so every single month, every single day, and helped us to get through to this point. He has been the rock I've lent on so many times, and he deserves a big round of applause too. Adam Richardson, our party secretary. So, where to now? What final hopeful message do I wish to leave you with before my watch has ended? We must always remember that UKIP is bigger than any of us individually. It's bigger than the squabbles and the differences. UKIP belongs to the people, our members, our voters, and the people we have yet to win over. Whilst there has been some controversy in the media about our leadership election, I'm proud that this is a party that trusts its membership with the decision on who should lead it for the future. As chairman, my role has been a simple one: keep enough money in the bank to see us through to the next month. Much has been sacrificed by many to help us achieve that, but I can say honestly, it's all been worth it. Alongside that, I've always seen it as my responsibility to protect a member's right to be part of this family, not, as some seem to think, to be the one desperate to throw people out. I leave proud in knowing that the team have defended the membership rights of some of our most ardent critics. Long may that be the way that this party operates. Most of all, I just want us to find our fun again, to remember that that which unites us will always outweigh the things upon which we might differ. What used to set this party apart was our ability to have fun together and to make a difference. That's what made this party what it was. It's what will keep this party strong, and I hope it's what will give our party and our country the future it deserves. Thank you.